Hello and welcome everybody to the Heartbeat of Mother Earth Summit. I am Jocelyn Mercado, your host, and I am so excited to have with us today Dr. Marilyn Steele. Welcome, Marilyn.
Thank you, Jocelyn. It's wonderful to be here.
Wonderful. So Dr. Marilyn Steele is a Jungian psychologist, author, speaker, shamanic dreamer, and mentor to prime time or 50-plus women. She works with visionary entrepreneurs and transformational leaders who yearn for greater access to their feminine power, their wild feminine souls, and a path to bring their wild wisdom into the world. Marilyn teaches widely on the essential role of women and the archetypal dynamic transformative feminine in the evolution of consciousness, a revisioning of the self, and an ecology of leadership. And the topic for her interview today is the emerging wild and sacred feminine, and my favorite part, women as wild cards. So Marilyn, my first question to you is, I know that you talk about in your book that you grew up in Hawaii. What was the impact of growing up in that particular location?
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn. Also, happy solstice. We should mention that today.
Yes, we are recording this on the winter solstice, a very powerful day. So yes, happy solstice.
Thank you. Well, growing up in Hawaii feels like one of my original blessings to do that. And the impact, I think, was I grew up in a place where the land really speaks through myth and story of the sacred feminine. It's one of the few places on earth where the sacred feminine is very alive. And all of us, although I'm not Hawaiian, I'm not native Hawaiian, I grew up with the rhythm of the waves, and the ocean was one of my first lullabies, the wind, all of that just seeped in, so that my feeling of nature, well, it's not even my feeling of nature as if it's outside, it's my feelings. I'm the palm tree, I'm the lava, I've watched fire move like a river, so all of that seeped into the cells of my being even before I could talk. And later, of course, I heard stories, and we would tell stories of Pele around the campfire, and all of that was very alive, the storytelling, the legends. But I think even deeper than that was just the spirit and the physicality of that, having lava. So I feel like an indigenous person. And I'm very tuned into the land on which I live. So that was just a great blessing. And also it's painful when I'm not, in touch with that, or I see things going on. So I feel like I have a foot in both worlds, kind of. The civilized, supposedly civilized world, and trying to bring the wild back. But it inhabits, or I am inhabited by it. Mm-hmm. So that was a wonderful blessing. I kind of have the music of the islands in me.
Beautiful.
Like that.
Beautiful. So when and how did you first get interested in Jungian psychology and in the evolution of consciousness?
Yes, I think I wanted to be a psychologist very, very young. I was so interested in the psyche. And I'm also an artist, and I love to paint and just beauty. The beauty of the islands was also something that I grew up with. Jungian psychology seemed to be one place where I could combine all of that. Dreams. I've been a dreamer since I was very young. There was trauma in my family. My baby sister died when she was 4 and had been ill for a long time, and nobody could deal with it in the family. So I kind of went off on my own, and I really was a wild child. I raised animals and spent a lot of time in nature and had these enormous dreams. Well, Jung is the one who really followed the way of the dream. So that looked like my tribe, kind of peculiar, eccentric people who were artists and dreamers. And it was a place where women, the psychology of women, had precedence. There was not still isn't very much, other theories or models of change and development where women's stories were central. So it was the only place I could feel like I had a toehold. So that was kind of, graduate school and further. And then as dreams started really opening me up even further. It's like there's no other place to be but following Jungian psychology, because that was a home tribe for me.
Mhm.
It was kind of frowned on. I had to be a closet Jungian when I was in graduate school. I found one professor, and he and I would close the door and have these secret conversations, because he was considered such a mystic, and kind of, although he is now, as you know, and your wonderful summit on ancient wisdom and modern science. I mean, Jung was one of the earliest ones who saw the meeting between science as it was emerging and the sacred.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It is funny how when people who are on the leading edge have to be in the closet for a little while at first, or just risk,
Well, or you're called weird.
Yeah, exactly.
You're called weird and dismissed. Yeah. And
And it takes courage to do that. It takes courage to expand into your full self, even when it's not part of mainstream society or not accepted yet,
Well, thanks. It does. I've always felt, though, and maybe you've had this too in your life, that when I needed to take a step on the path, I kind of had no choice. So it didn't even feel like personal courage. It felt like, sometimes I was like, oh God, do I really have to go there? Do I really have to do that? And yes, because the self, big S, when you get that call of the soul, that is where you need to go to expand and grow. So I've often felt that.
Yeah. The call that you can't say no to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you share a little bit more about dreams? Maybe, one of your dreams or just in general, how, dreams help us on our journey.
Yeah. Well, that's another blessing, I feel like, when I felt kind of cracked open. It opened me to the dream world, which is the archetypal world, the world of the collective unconscious. So it is such a rich, and I think the dreams are always looking for us, the way stories do. They're looking for an opening. So they've been for me a companion, a guide, this way next. It's given me the sense that, and I will tell you a dream, but just kind of the overview of how sacred we are, that we really are souls. We're spiritual first, and that's even wider. And the body is kind of within the soul, not the other way around. We're bigger as souls and spirits than we are as bodies. Mm-hmm. And to know that there's that presence there that's always trying to get your attention, help you, warn you, call you, kick you out of your path, so. And one of the ones on my women's path that was quite dramatic was when I was in my 30s and just divorced and with 2 small children and not sure really, I hadn't yet gone to graduate school in psychology. So, and I was lost in this parking lot, this fluorescent, low ceiling, looking for my car, looking for how I was going to go. And I'm going up the spiral ramp looking for my car, and it isn't there. It isn't in this concrete, cold place. So I leave and I go out the back door into a field, and I get farther and farther out into nature. It's enormous grassland. There's nobody around, and the grass is kind of moving, and I go up this hill and I'm looking for my keys out there in the grass. And as I'm looking, this huge reindeer, and I think now it was a female, I didn't know at the time, but she comes up to me, and in her wordless way, her silence, she shows me how to lean towards the earth, and she takes her antlers and she lines them up with the earth. And she teaches me to line up with the earth. And then she says to me, silently, the way in dreams, you need to learn to listen with the ear of your heart, and then you will find your way. So that was an orienting dream that helped me. I've tried to do that ever since, sometimes more successfully than others. Mm-hmm. And dreams like that are big dreams. They're not just personal dreams, although personally I was in a really tough spot and it was a dark night of the soul and I needed help, and that was wonderful. But it was a bigger dream, and that's why I've had to all these 40 years ago, continue to grow into that dream, because that is the message, that when we align with the laws of nature, both our own wild and sacred nature, which are the same as the laws and the alignment of the earth, then we are open-hearted and we are living the law in alignment with our wild and sacred nature. So that's where the wild feminine and the wild earth are the same. So that was my beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What a powerful, what powerful symbolism in that dream, that you're emerging from this kind of concrete box into the meadow or the field, and that you were, even within the concrete box, that you were on a spiral.
Yes.
To find your way out.
Exactly right.
Really incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very beautiful. Yeah. There, I have been reading bits of your book, and it's really incredible. I'm really enjoying it. There's one chapter, and if you don't mind, I'd love to read a little paragraph from it to share with the audience, and
sure.
then ask you to maybe say a little bit about it. And this is in the chapter about grandmother spider.
Yes.
So it's talking about, reweaving our web.
Mm-hmm.
So this paragraph that I marked says, "We need to reweave the broken web of our being. By doing so, we can remake the world. See ourselves from the earth up rather than the sky down. Understand that we are mostly empty space, more liquid than solid, and always becoming. We are the universe in person, of the earth, not on it. We carry the ashes of stars in our bones. We look out through seawater. The spark of life that animates each of us was first lit at the dawn of creation." So beautiful, and just so resonant of that sacred feminine that's within each of us, male or female.
Yes.
Magic is within us, and we can reconnect with it or connect more deeply with it.
Yes.
Would you share a little more about that, that chapter, yes, or the idea of reweaving our web?
Yes. And thank you for your kind words and also reading that. And yes, the wild and sacred feminine is an archetype, so it is theoretically available to both women and men, but we are closer to it. We as women are closer to it in our body. And in that passage, coming from the ground up and really knowing that we have universes within is such an important knowing. And I wanted to say that, to tell our listeners, although they won't be listening on this specific day, but in the present time, as I got up this morning and I was thinking, I wonder which dreams would be most useful to share. And I wanted to tell the reindeer dream for sure. And there's the shamanic antlers, and all of that, and starting on my path. And there are other dreams. And grandmother Spider Woman spoke up. She said, "What about my story?" And so I said, well, that is a wonderful dream. And I love how you came to me. But we're going to leave it to Jocelyn and me and see how the process goes. And if you need to speak up, if that
has spoken,
and then you tell me this morning that this is the part of the book that you wanted to share with our listeners, which is the voice of grandmother Spider Woman. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you the dream because she has called out to both of us, and she's very insistent. And this was a dream, and she is the weaver. She is the weaver. And she also came to me. I had not heard of grandmother Spider Woman when I had this dream. Let me just tell you this dream, and then we'll talk a little about it. So in 1987, my youngest daughter was 4. And in the dream, I want to show her the wonders of nature. So I take her out into nature and begin to show her all the plants and the animals that I see. And first we look at worms. And the first worm that comes up is a plain brown worm. And I talk about the wonders and the exquisiteness of this wonderful wiggly worm. And isn't that fabulous? And then the next worm that comes out has polka dots. And then the next worm that comes out has stripes, and they become increasingly complex and rich and colorful. So we're really having fun, my daughter and I, seeing these bits of nature. And then the next animal, there are many animals, but the next one that I recall was spiders. And the first spider that comes out is a plain, skinny, daddy long legs. And then the next one that comes out is kind of a brown one. And they become increasingly complex and increasingly detailed and increasingly rich until this enormous spider comes out, and she's walking towards us, and she has blue silk antenna behind her eyes, and she has white plumes of feathers before and back. And oh my God, look at this creature. She was just magnificent, pink and white flowers and antenna, and it's just this enormous spider. So she lets us know that we are to follow her. So I take my daughter's hand and we follow this great, beautiful, clearly a feminine spider. And as we walk, she wants to take the path into the forest. It's kind of a weaving path into the forest. And off to my right, I see my father, who's sitting in a chair reading a book. And all around him is barren soil. It's completely cleared of any green growing thing. And he's reading a book, very intellectual, very brilliant. And I try to call out to him, Father, look at this amazing creature. We're going to go into the forest. But he's so engrossed in his book that he doesn't hear us. And off we go into the forest. Now, when I woke up from that, I thought, well, what a creature. And I did paint it and I drew it. And I've started to do research. And that was Grandmother Spider Woman. That's how she came to me. And this is very important. So this was 1987 for me. But it has to do with the land dreaming. The land, we are dreaming and land together. And Grandmother Spider Woman introduced herself to me. And then I learned about her. And she is the great weaver, and she's the great creator god in so many Native American traditions. She's the beginning. And there were many turnings in my mind, but the idea of she's a thinking god. She's not necessarily a mother goddess. She's one who thinks into space, and she thinks us into being. So she's the one who creates the stories that make our world. So this is a very central core idea that women have not had, or it's being returned to them. After 5,000, we're not just the caretakers. It's beyond. We are creators. We are essential creators. And Grandmother Spider Woman is, of course, a weaver, weaving the webs. And this is how we're all connected, not just to each other as peoples, but to all the beings, to the worms, to the spiders, to the trees, to the leaves, to the forest. And it's alive in us. It's not outside of us. It's within us. So, and we have this spark of the divine. So that section that you read, to really get that we're not walking on this earth. We are walking as earth. We are moving with the tides, I think. And we literally have stardust in our bones. So we come from the stars. We have that same vastness. And we are part of the sea. So really to know that it's in your body, and that therefore we are creators of the most essential kind, and we have the spark of the divine. And that never goes out. That spark of the divine that comes with, no matter how dim it's gotten, or we've forgotten it, or it's lost in the basement, or hidden in the floor, it is always there, and we all have it, and it connects us all. It's kind of like Indra's net too, which is an Indian story, a Hindu story, which is also holographic, as from your love of science. Mm-hmm. So Grandmother Spider Woman also connected me, and I got more and more in love with science in the 70s and 80s. It's like, oh my God, it's the same story. It's the same story, that we are each holograms, and we're each microcosms, and we are each part of the whole, but we're also the whole, and we're connected. So that field idea is part of Grandmother Spider Woman too. We're not discrete, separate entities. We are the process and the connection in between. The part that we see is just the smallest part of us, It's the energy and the heart love in between. Well, that was my little run around that section.
Oh, thank you so much. That was really beautiful. So you mentioned science just now, and I've seen that you described the new science as speaking in the voice of the feminine. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So in the voice of the feminine, or the mother tongue, and that's a phrase I got from Ursula Le Guin, where the father tongue is the one who's separated. So like in the dream that I just told about grandmother Spider Woman, and that wasn't my actual personal father, by the way. He was a wonderful environmentalist and did a lot to work for world peace, but he is the father who is separate and discrete. And that's the father tongue that kind of makes distinctions and separation. So therefore we have this myth that the self is separate and should be quite autonomous and separate and impermeable. But in the mother tongue, when you speak in the mother tongue, you are speaking the language, the first language of mother, where we know that we are both self and other. There is no separation. We are, yes, ourselves, but we are also other. And that is a constant. So the mother tongue, when you speak in the mother tongue, you are acknowledging interconnection and as the fundamental. That's the first truth, is that we're interconnected. And in new science, it's like, oh, look at this. It's like it's new, but it's such an ancient story, isn't it? We used to know this. There is no separation. We're in a field. We're not these little billiard balls that are floating around, knocking into each other and making things happen. No. We're this great textured fabric of being, this great web. And where one piece of it moves, so does the other. It's the butterfly effect or whatever. Oh, it started coming together and weaving in my own mind about, this is the feminine also in science as well. This is where we begin to reunite spirituality and science, where the story starts coming back together. Oh yes, first of all, we're interconnected and interdependent. You cannot separate one from the other. So the experiment, and there David Bohm and Niels Bohr and the Bell's theorem. Well, it's kind of a funny story that I even fell in love with science in 1979, and I do want to mention Ilya Prigogine, just for those who are interested. I was a subscriber to Brain Mind Bulletin, which some of your older listeners might know of. And I read about this Belgian chemist who won the Nobel Prize in biochemistry, and there was something about that theory that we are all connected, and also the way that we move and changes through periods of chaos and turbulence. I thought, well, that sounds like my life. I recognized myself immediately. So it's like, there's no such thing as a step ladder or stages or any linear path. My life had never moved like that. The women I knew did not move like that in their lives. So through really an embodied understanding of how I was growing and changing and transforming, I recognized this theory. It's like, oh my gosh, this is really more how life moves. And also Prigogine's theory, there were these wonderful illustrations of what it's an awful name. I'd love to think up another one, but it's called a dissipative structure. And it's a complex structure that's always moving, Well, that's what we do. We're always moving. There's no such thing, I'm sorry to say, as safety and no change and solidity. We're really not very solid. We're really quite fluid. So anyway, it was quite funny that I fell in love with his theory and then science in particular, because I almost flunked out of college because of the science requirement. So that's just another little note about God and the goddess and higher power. Has quite a sense of humor, I find, taking you off the path into something that you need to know. But anyway, it's mostly about the connection and also the weaving path in new science, and also that we're interdependent and dynamic, constantly fluid and dynamic, and affecting one another simultaneously. Because if you're all connected, you can't move one part without moving another part. So it's Jungian too, in terms of synchronicity. You know, the way that this happened for us this morning with Grandmother Spider-Woman. I had no idea, one, that you were reading my book, thank you very much, and that you would choose that section. But somebody knew about it. Who was that?
Yeah.
You know? And so we call her Grandmother Spider-Woman, but she's great spirit, she's the mystery, she's the holy, she's the universe. And that's speaking to us all the time. We aren't always aware of it. But keep your eyes peeled, you know, especially through dreams when we can kind of relax that ego consciousness and let it through. But all day long, that is going on, you know. So that is very feminine, that relationship, that it's a relational universe. We are not separate. So we can take heart in that we are not all alone in the universe. But we also take humility in that, because that means you can't exactly control things. I mean, you can't, not exactly. You cannot cause, you can participate, and you are a co-creator. That is very important. But we're not the billiard ball who you throw into, you know, one other bit and make it move. That's not how we're moving, and that's not how we're changing.
Yeah. I think that is such an important part of opening to our sacred feminine and our wild woman, is hearing that little voice,
yes,
recognizing it and listening and taking action. And I've learned the hard way in some cases to listen to that voice, because it never guides me wrong. And you know, there were years and years when I was very out of touch with my intuition, and I was taking on very masculine attributes in my life, as far as my work, you know, trying to achieve and be successful, and I couldn't hear my intuition. But since I have learned to recognize, you know, that small voice, it's incredible the path that I have been led on. And you know, you mentioned this about, you know, me choosing this passage from your book, you know, so what are the chances that, you know, I didn't have to buy your book?
No.
But something told me I should, and I didn't have to choose that particular chapter or paragraph, but you know, there was this voice speaking. So that's just one little small example of it. You know, there are many, many bigger, more life-changing ones, of course, but so important.
It's wonderful. And I think, you know, it's so, I love hearing your experience. I know a little bit about your story, but when you are moving from a career and identity and it's masculine, and most of us women, and we're different generations, but still, if you were going to achieve anything, you were in that mindset. I mean, it is the mass. Those are the structures of our institutions, our education, our government. So to be shocked out of it, and I don't know if this was true for you, but really one of my first shocks about it was becoming a young mother. And I remember sitting outside at Pete's, and I had first of all, going through labor and having a child. I was like, part of me was, well, I was also laboring, and, you know, I did it, Lamaze the whole way, natural, great. But I was thinking, how did I ever believe that women weren't powerful? This is the most incredibly powerful. I feel like a mountain is coming through me. I feel like a locomotive is coming through me. I can't believe I'm not breaking into a million pieces. So there was this little voice, even while I was, you know, doing the physical labor and this little voice was like, yeah, women are incredible, and they have been, and you are part of this lineage. Because I hadn't really planned on being a woman. That's the truth of it. I hadn't, because they didn't look like they had any power. I didn't want to grow up and be a woman. So that was first. And I was sitting, I was sitting outside. I had my 1.5-year-old at that point. Greatest, wonderful experience of my life. And I was perfectly happy with him. In the moment, we're watching the birds, we're watching the light, the leaves move, you know, in the wind. And I'm absolutely content and 110% present. And as we sit there, this man comes in with a 3-piece suit and carrying a briefcase, and he sits down next to me, and immediately, Jocelyn, I came out of that presence and complete joy of being in the moment with my son. Mm-hmm. And I thought about this. He didn't speak to me, this man in his 3-piece suit with his handsome briefcase, but I wanted to tap him on the shoulder and say, you know, actually, I read the New York Times, and I graduated from UC Berkeley, and And I thought, what is that mind in my head? So it's kind of the opposite of what you were saying, but it was a beginning of my work. Well, it's like, oh my gosh, you have to listen to this other, listen to how your mind has been completely colonized, because this is not true. These are not true, but it is hard to listen. So that was a long time ago, but that's how it comes, these little, wow, it isn't easy always to listen. And you do have to find practices and ways for you to get quiet, because it is not the dominant thought world.
No, it's not what we're trained and taught in school and in the workplace, or whatever career we might choose. And it's incredible about what you said just now, because yes, becoming a mother was absolutely when everything changed for me. And it wasn't for me, it was because all of a sudden I had this little tiny child, my first daughter. And all of a sudden I wanted to, change the way that I was behaving, because of how I suddenly realized it would affect her later on in her life. I wanted to change the kind of role model that I was being for her sake. And it never occurred to me to do it for my own sake, but for her sake.
Yes.
I had a whole new outlook, and that's what eventually, it took a long time, but eventually allowed me to hear that voice.
It's wonderful. I made many of my finest decisions on behalf of my children first, before I could thank them for myself. So I agree with that.
That does help a bit. That kind of kicks us into action, I guess.
Yes. Well, it speaks to our hearts,
Yeah, definitely. So what are some other suggestions that you have for how a woman can connect with her wild feminine essence?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think takes us to what we're talking about, trying to hear that voice when it isn't the dominant voice. And it's a still small voice, it is a whisper. It also speaks to us through our body, because if we remember that we're really souls in a body, then the soul, and Clarissa Estes, Pinkola Estes talks a lot about this, is that the body speaks to us, for our own good. So hopefully you won't get to that point, but illnesses can do it, little twinges, dreams do it. I've never been much of a sitting meditator, although any way that you can quiet your mind is good. I need to be in nature. So being in nature and just letting yourself feel that, listen, sit by a tree, sit by a running brook, be someplace where you are in beauty. Beauty helps a lot. Writing, what else? Dancing. Dancing and music is a wonderful way. And be prepared. Once you start turning to that and saying, I want to hear this, tell me what your will for me is. Any kind of prayer that you have or any kind of practice, that kind of gets the attention of Great Spirit, where it's like, okay, let me show you this. And then things begin to open up a little in your life. Did you find that too? That once you begin to feed that and say, I really want to hear, the way you go to sleep at night and say, I really would like some insight. What is it that I need to see that I'm not seeing? Or what could be a path? And when you begin to do it, the dreams go, oh, all right. Here's somebody who's listening. Let me come to you. And it does. Not just dreams, but in your waking life, which is another form of the dream. It's the dream and the story that we've made up, that we're living in, and probably several stories at one time, but let's not complicate things. And synchronicities and symbols and animals will come to you. Animals have been very important in my life, both in my waking life and my dreaming life. So the spirit of an animal, not just as a totem or a symbol outside, but really something that wants to come alive in you. So spending time just attending to those, be prepared for a surprise today. Kind of just cast your attention to that. It's like, I wonder what I'll see today. It could be a license plate. It could be a synchronicity of a song. I've had that happen. I don't know if you have, with the radio, all of a sudden you're thinking something, or you didn't turn on that station, but this song has come on and you listen to the lyrics and it's like, oh my gosh, that is just what I needed to hear right now, you know?
Yeah.
So
Even along those lines, flipping to a page in a book, just
yes,
picking up a book and opening it and letting
yes,
whatever wants to show up for you.
that's how it happens. And speaking of that, we were talking about how it's not the dominant theory, and listening to your intuition is sometimes hard because it makes you go against the, not just the overwhelming order of things, but who you thought you were.
Yeah.
And were meant to be, and your path. And when I was writing my book and I was casting about for the title, the right title that would make it, And so I asked my dream, I said, well, could you just give me a hint of what I should call this, this? And the dream that I got was just one word, and it was in huge neon signs, and the word was weird. I woke up from that dream, Jocelyn. I was so angry at the dream. But don't feel guilty if you get angry at your dreams, because I do that a lot. So, thanks so much. I'm asking you for guidance, and that's your spiritual guidance, that I should call it weird, So I was really, really mad. So I was sitting at my desk. Wow, there's no help for me. I'm all alone in this world. No guidance for me, and plugging away. Right. And this book fell off. So I had a small shelf that was just right above my desktop. Mm-hmm. And this book fell off, and it was the 13 Clan Mothers by Jamie Sams. And I did this opening of the book because I'm still looking for guidance. I'm not going to take that weird thing. I'm not calling a book weird. I mean, who wants to be weird? So I just opened this book. It's like, give me some spiritual guidance here. And I opened to, now this is a Native American book, and she had the section on weird. W-Y-R-D, wow. Which is a Celtic word, and it means following the path of God. Mm. So it's following, and there are all sorts in the UK, and there are all sorts of communities of Druids and stuff who follow the path of weird. But isn't that amazing? From this Native American person, from the book falling on me, and from my dream. So it just cracked me up. And it's like, weird, you're following your path, which is not the dominant path. But the meaning of weird is that you're following your sacred path, and you really have your eye, your heart, listen towards God in your sacred path, which is not always going to look, well, it won't, by definition. Yeah. Artists know this, creative people and soul-driven people. It's like there's the pain of being, you wonder if you'll belong ever, or are you just going to be weird on the outskirts? So I'm just so happy to be with people like you, Jocelyn, because it's no longer, there's more of us weird ones, who are following the sacred path. And so I can see the tribe, and it's emerging everywhere, and it just gives me such excitement and joy and hope for what's coming on this longest night of the year.
Yeah.
Darkness.
Very much so. Yeah. From a language perspective, that's quite fascinating, because that could quite likely be the origin of the word weird. That people who were following God's path were weird, and they don't belong to the way that we use it now. Very interesting. So can you tell me a little bit about why are women wild cards? Why are we wild cards? I feel like a wild card, but
that's a good phrase.
My husband thinks I'm a wild card.
Yeah.
So, what is your theory on that?
When you start following the path that you're following, and that I'm following. And I first heard that phrase in relation to women from Terry Tempest Williams, and she was speaking to Congress. So she's not only a wonderful writer, of course, and spiritual person, but she's really a wonderful political activist. And I thought, wild cards. That's what we women need to be. And I was also in the process of my writing process. My writing style is I tend to write in spurts and all day long, so that a lot of my notes will end up on shopping lists, grocery lists, or the back of envelopes, or I'll read something that I love and whatever I can write on, Mm-hmm. So I had in mind that I wanted to collect some of the quotations of poetry that really centered me and inspired me and kind of brought me home, but I wanted to get them all in one place. So I had the idea of putting them together in a deck of cards. So first was the thought of just organizing myself, which is apparently lifelong, and maybe many lifetimes of a task for me. So getting organized with my quotations. And then I thought about putting a painting on the front of the cards of how I returned to painting. And that's another story that I tell in the book of how I returned to painting after 35 years and how I needed to learn to let go of what I thought I wanted my painting to look like. Mm-hmm. And Turtle came through on that one. And then I thought, women are wild cards right now. We are the ones. I mean, this is we have some familiarity in all cultures of the world about the great mother, the caring one, the inclusive one, the all-loving, wonderful, beautiful. But we have not had the wild feminine. We have not had, in Jungian terms, it's the dynamic, transformative feminine. She's creative, she's fierce, she's fiery, she's wild as in untamed, undomesticated. She is herself, one unto herself, and she follows the laws of her own nature, weird though they may be, and she follows her own path. But she's enormously creative, and she's also very playful. So we haven't had the idea, Grandmother Spider-Woman, of course, is a creator, but I mean in modern times of we are the ones who can create, not just babies who are wonderful and the other way that we care for, but really a whole new, something that's never been done before. So I like that idea of wild cards. It's something that we haven't seen before. So I love the goddess. I love learning about the goddess. I love my goddess dreams, all of that ancient, very, very important stories. But really, it's a wild card. It's the thing that has never been here before. So it's not just recapturing feminine power and wisdom from the past. It's making up something that's brand new. And when I began to feel like that, it's like, here's my deck of cards and here's my painting, and that's creative, and the poetry is sacred. But I'm going to leave a blank card because I feel like every single woman has something in her, that is her gift and that has never been seen before and is exactly the thing that we need to, I don't want to use that word, to change the game, to completely change the game and transform it, not just add to it. So it's not, the wild and sacred feminine has been missing for a long time, but it's not just to add that fourth element which is missing to make a whole. It's that adding that thing that changes the entire pattern.
To change the structure itself.
It changes the structure itself and the relationship of all the pieces to the structure. It's the catalyst, and that isn't quite strong enough word, but it's, a kaleidoscope that you look through and it has the colored glass and you shake it, and then it's a new pattern. Well, that's what I think of when being wild cards. We are the shakers, the movers and shakers. And when we bring our gifts and our wisdom and our power and kind of let it rip, in a creative, playful, full way, then the whole entire pattern of everything changes. We're not just looking for equity or parity. It's not that, although I also respect and applaud those. It's adding that thing that's going to change the entire game. And that's where we are now. And we each have to do that, however small, big, even if you think you're really little, and I do often know that I'm really little. It's it's the wisdom of the story of the hummingbird that Wangari Maathai. Do you know Wangari Maathai? Do you know of her?
Yeah, I do.
The Green Belt movement. And she told the story of the hummingbird, and there's this great forest fire raging. And don't we have that? I mean, isn't that where we are in the world? Mm-hmm. So this great forest fire is raging, and this beautiful little hummingbird is going to the lake and taking her one beak full of water and going to the forest fire and dropping a drop. She goes back to the lake, and it's a long distance, and she flies back to the forest and puts her one drop on the forest. And all the large animals, the wild animals of the forest, are laughing at her. And it's like, what do you think you're doing? That's absolutely hopeless. And she keeps doing it, persevering, patient. She said, yes, but this is what I can do. So I feel like that really is the change that happens. That's all you have to do is take your own drop of water, your own gift, your own light of the divine. Yeah. But it's very feminine. It's a completely new order of things. So.
Yeah, very beautiful. There's not to go on too much about this other speaker, but in this summit, Ilarion Merkuliev is another speaker. He's a man had a traditional indigenous upbringing in an island off the coast of Alaska, and he talks about the womb of the universe, and he says that when women gather, we can access the womb of the universe, the ultimate creative force, the highest creative force. Yes. And we can birth something entirely new.
Yes.
And that is what we have to do right now. And that just resonates so closely with exactly.
Oh, I'm so glad. And I'm glad to know of him. I hadn't known of him before, but that's exactly right. And, I've started teaching this course called The Way of the Wild Feminine online, and using a version of the medicine wheel in 7 directions. But I begin us in the West, the land of darkness. It's partly Hawaiian indigenous because everything comes out of the land of Po, which is darkness. But it's exactly that idea. We begin there because that's the womb. That's woman's place. That's where all creation comes from, and it's the place of mystery and dreaming, and that's where we can dream a new story. So beautiful. Isn't it perfect that we are in darkness right now, both on this day of the solstice and also in so many ways around the world? But that is, as Roka says, you darkness that I come from, I love you more than all the fires of the world, because everything is in you, and the new comes out of the womb. Yeah. So that's us. It's wild cards.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this.
Oh, you're so welcome.
I do want to mention to the summit audience that you are offering a free gift. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I am. I'm just piggyback on the wild card. So I am offering free gifts. I'm happy to do it, and so happy to be with you, Jocelyn. This is really fun. And the first gift, and I'm doing it as a drawing. So the first possibility would be to get a deck of these wild cards. So there are 26 cards, and they have poetry, spiritual poetry, women's poetry on one side, with a painting of the leatherback on the front. And there's one blank card for you to speak your own truth as a wild card, because it is time. Sorry for the cliche, but this is really what it is. It's time for us to put our cards on the table. So I want to call forward, and there's a booklet that comes with these cards, which has some of these ideas and the story of the turtle. But because when women step into their greatness, it's like there's so much beauty, and magnificence and fierceness that can come into play. So it's a call to your creativity. So that's the first gift possibility. And the second one is a half-hour complimentary dream consultation, which we can do via phone or Skype or in person if you're in the Bay Area of California. And I love working with dreams, and I would love to explore and discover with you. And maybe we'll get an inkling of what your wild card gift is that you're bringing to the world and the new story that wants to emerge through you. Because as we, as we each bring our gifts and our stories of our own women's lives, we are contributing to this great new story of the emerging feminine consciousness. We all have a part in that, but it's an enormous shift, which is shifting the entire.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And so all the information to put your name in for these free gifts is right on this webpage, right below this interview. So you can link through to Marilyn's website and find out how to do that. And you're giving away 7 of each gift.
Yes,
Right?
seven decks of wild cards and 7 half-hour dream consultations. So
Okay,
you
right.
enter your name for a
Yeah,
chance. And I look forward to meeting you. Yeah.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Marilyn. This has been so much fun. Really incredible sharing and chatting with you. So thank you for your time and for being a part of this summit. It's been wonderful.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.